Hare Krishna Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare.
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्री गौर भक्त वृंद। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपीकांत राधाकांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदानेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। बोलो श्री राधे गोलोकानंद भगवान की जय। श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। कृष्णा तरुण।
हरे कृष्णा गजेंद्र, कैसे हो?
बस बस चल रहा है देखो। कैसे आपकी IMRC की तैयारी
चल रही है, थोड़ा फाइट चल रहा है उसमें।
है?
ऑडियो वीडियो एडिटिंग वगैरह चल रही है। आपकी हो गई सबमिशन?
अरे बस वही, अच्छा आपने याद दिलाया उस दिन। सो देन आई हैड आशीष कांटेक्ट देम एंड सो दे एग्रीड कि हो जाएगा। बट देन वी
हाँ,
वर्क ऑन द थीम। अच्छा थीम हो गया है हमारा भी। सो वी हैव
गुड,
प्रीटी गुड थीम आई थिंक गिवन द टाइम वी डिसाइडेड
हाँ,
इट बैड।
नाइस।
अभी ऑडियो ऑडियो क्लिप वगैरह जो भी है सब इकट्ठा कर रहे हैं। एक दो डांस वांस की प्रैक्टिस वैक्टिस सब शुरू कर रहे हैं लोग बाग, तो आई थिंक एटलीस्ट विल बी एबल टू गेट ऑन द स्टेज।
अरे नहीं, क्या बात कर रहे हैं? अरे आशीष आप लोग एक से एक स्टेज होल्ड करने वाले लोग हैं यार।
टाइम नहीं था एक्चुअली, वो तो अच्छा थैंक्स टू यू एक्चुअली। तो मैं आशीष को पूछा कि भाई क्या हुआ अपना। तो ही सेड या देयर वाज समवन हु वाज कोऑर्डिनेटिंग बट शी नेवर कॉल्ड बैक करके, एंड देन जस्ट नथिंग
होता है,
हैपेंड।
या हो जाता है।
हाँ इट्स ओके, बट वी हैड द थीम, सो हम लोग 7-8 लोग आए कॉल पे। सो वी वर्कड इट आउट एंड टू एंड कैसे
नाइस,
चलेगा। तो अभी काम चल रहा है। आई
गुड
थिंक
गुड।
इट शुड कम टुगेदर।
हम्म,
तो वही है।
गुड गुड।
आज अजय भी लग रहा है बिजी है।
या
ठीक है, अपन शुरू करते
ठीक
हैं। ऑलराइट, सो अपन या yesterday we were reading 35th श्लोक, एंड इसमें महाराज पृथु इज गिविंग एडवाइस टू द सिटीजन्स। Essentially he is telling all the citizens कि bhakti yoga is what is the most important thing, and all the citizens if they are in bhakti yoga, I mean think about that place, right, or that world. How will that world be if everybody in bhakti yoga, right? So Prithu Maharaj is giving that advice to everyone, and that's what we are reading right now. We'll continue with that. So Tarun पढ़ोगे? Okay.
अहो ममामि वित्रांत्री अनुग्रहम हरिम गुरुम यज्ञभुजम अधिवेश्वरम स्वधर्म योगेन यजन्ति ममका मामका निरंतर शोणितले दृढ़व्रतः. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master and enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices, and he is the Supreme Spiritual Master as well. All of you citizens on the surface of the globe who have a relationship with me and are worshipping him by dint of your occupational duties are bestowing your mercy upon me. Therefore, O my citizens, I thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So Maharaj Prithu सब citizens को कह रहे हैं कि if you are doing this, if you are worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so not only you are building the relation, but this is your mercy upon me, because they are his praja, right? And that's why he thanks And then the other thing which is mentioned here is he is the supreme spiritual master as well. Right? He says Harim Gurum. So he is the supreme spiritual master. And then of course everything done in Yajna is Yajna Bhujam Adi Ishwaram. He is the one who is the enjoyer of the results of all the sacrifices. Yeah. But the most important part is that he is the supreme spiritual master, and that goes well with that shlok which we are reading, the 10.10 in Bhagavad Gita, that as you do the devotional service, as you surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right, he will give us the intelligence by which we can go back to him, and that is the action of the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Ma jatu tejah prabhuven mahatvipi स्थिति क्षया तपसा विद्या च देदीप्यमाने अधिदेवतानां कुलेश्वं राजकुलात् त्विजानाम्. The Brahmins and Vaishnavas are personally glorified by their characteristic powers of tolerance, finance, knowledge, and education. By dint of all these spiritual assets, Vaishnavas are more powerful than royalty. It is therefore advised that the princely order not exhibit its material prowess before these two communities and should avoid offending them. Yeah? So what Maharaj Prathu is saying is that Brahmins and Vaishnavas, right, essentially the devotees of the Lord, are more powerful than the royalty, right, than the king and the kingdom itself, right? The Vaishnavas are more powerful and should be respected, is what Maharaj Prithu is saying. Yeah.
Brahmanya Devah Purusha Puratano Nityam Hariye Chandrana Bhivanta Danatah Avapa Lakshmim Anayan Payaninim Yaso Jagat Pavitram Cha Mahattaman Graniha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ancient eternal Godhead, who is foremost amongst all great personalities, obtained the opulence of his staunch reputation, which purifies the entire universe, by worshipping the lotus feet of those Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ancient eternal Godhead. Yeah, Purusha Puratano. That is the Brahmanya Deva hai. And interesting thing is that which purifies the entire universe by worshipping the lotus feet of those Brahmins and Vaishnavas. Like even by worshipping the lotus feet of the devotees, yeah, the whole world gets purified. This is what is mentioned. Yat sevaya sesh guhashayah swaraga viprapriyastusyati kamam ishwarah tadeva tatkarmam parera vinite hai sarvatmana brahma kulam nishedvatyam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is everlastingly independent and who exists in everyone's heart, is very pleased with those who follow in his footsteps and engage without reservation in the service of the descendants of Brahmins and Vaishnavas. For he is always dear to Brahmins and Vaishnavas, and they are always dear to him. Yeah, is what Prithu Maharaj is saying, to respect Brahmins and Vaishnavas. And actually it's mentioned like who is a Brahmin, not just because they are born in the Brahmin family, but the one who follows all the characteristics of a Brahmin according to Vedas. And same thing is the Vaishnava, one who is a devotee, doesn't have to be born in any family. Yeah, any devotee who is the right Vaishnava are the ones who should be respected. Yeah? Hare Krishna, Ajay.
Hare Krishna, sir. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Pummal Bhetani Vilmatmanah Prasidayut Ant Shramam Swatah Swayam Yanitasya Sambandhani Shedataya Shivaya Tatah Param Kim Trastri Mukham Harvibhujam. By regular service to Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, one can clear the dirt from his heart and thus enjoy supreme peace and liberation from material attachment and be satisfied. In the world, there is no fruitive activity superior to serving the Brahman class, for this can bring pressure to the demigods for whom the many sacrifices are recommended. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Like, the interesting part mentioned is thus enjoy supreme peace and liberation from material attachment. Like generally we talk about the enjoyment of the materialistic things, right? Like, oh, if you do this, you'll enjoy, we go here and there and whatever, right? But here he's saying you are going to enjoy, yeah? What are you going to enjoy? Which is the anand and bliss is actually the liberation from material attachment. Once you are liberated from the material attachment, then you get the eternal pleasure, is what is mentioned, right? Actually, this is a nice purpose. So let's read this. Hare Krishna, Rinaji.
Hare Krishna Bhaiya.
Krishna, padenge.
Ji. In Bhagavad Gita 2.65, it is said, Prasade sarva dukhanyam hanir asayo pajayate. Unless one is self-satisfied, he cannot be free from the miserable conditions of material existence. Therefore, it is essential to render service to the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas to achieve the perfection of self-satisfaction. Sri Narottam Das Thakur therefore says, Tandir charan sevi bhaktasane vasa janme janme haya ei abhilasha. Birth after birth, I desire to serve the lotus feet of the acharyas and live in a society of devotees. A spiritual atmosphere can be maintained only by living in a society of devotees and by serving the orders of the acharyas. The spiritual master is the best Brahman. At present, in the age of Kali, it is very difficult to render service to the Brahman Kula or the Brahman class. The difficulty, according to the Varaha Puran, is that demons, taking advantage of Kali Yuga, have taken birth in Brahman families. Rakshas Kalim Asritya Jayante Brahma Yonishu. Varaha Puran. In other words, in this age there are many so-called caste Brahmanas and caste Goswamis who, taking advantage of the Shastra and of the innocence of people in general, claim to be Brahmanas and Vaishnavas by hereditary right. One will not derive any benefit by rendering service to such false Brahman kulas. One must therefore take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and his associates and should also render service to them, for such activity will greatly help the neophyte in attaining full satisfaction. This has been very clearly explained by Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his explanation of the verse Vyavasayamika Budher Ekaha Kuru Nandan in 2.41. By actually following the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga as recommended by Sri Narottam Das Thakur, one can very quickly come to the transcendental platform of liberation, as explained in this verse, Atyant Samam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So, couple of things mentioned in this paragraph are, one is, of course, as we know these days, there are a lot of people who will declare themselves as scents and all that, right? So we need to be careful of those. And also a lot of people, just because they are born in a particular caste, they will declare themselves, right? So that's not how a true Brahman and Vaishnava is identified. Yeah. But then, having said that, there are also a lot of such Rishi Munis who are just doing tapasya, and they are there and they are really great, great devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And one should, you know, should find them and then also render service to them as well, is what is mentioned here. Yeah. And yeah, it says the particular use of the word anativelam, that is without delay, is very significant, because simply by serving Brahmins and Vaishnavas, one can get liberation. There is no need to undergo severe penances and austerities. The vivid example of this is Narad Muni himself. In his previous birth, he was simply a maid servant's son, but he got the opportunity to serve exalted Brahmins and Vaishnavas. And thus, in this next life, he not only became liberated, but became famous as the supreme spiritual master of the entire Vaishnava disciplic succession. According to the Vedic system, therefore, it is customarily recommended that after performing a ritualistic ceremony, one should feed the Brahmins. Yeah. But then Brahman is what? Like all these devotees, right? And the people who have surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rinaji?
अश्नात्यन्तः खलु तत्त्वकोविदे श्रद्धाहुतं यन्मुख इज्यनामभिः न वै तथा च विधमया बहिष्कृते हुताशने पारमहंस्यर्पर्युगः यगो. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anant, eats through the fire sacrifices offered in the names of the different demigods, he does not take much pleasure in eating through fire as he does in accepting offerings through the mouths of learned sages and devotees, for then he does not leave the association of devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah? I think that this is nice, Tarun.
According to Vedic injunctions, a fire sacrifice is held in order to give food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the names of the different demigods. While performing a fire sacrifice, one pronounces the words Swaha in mantras such as Indraya Swaha and Adityaya Swaha. These mantras are uttered to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, though demigods such as Indra and Aditya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, Naham tistami vaikunte yoginam hridesu va tatra tisitami narada yatra gayanti mad bhaktya. I am not in Vaikuntha nor in the hearts of the yogis. I remain where my devotees engage in glorifying my activities. It is to be understood that the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not leave the company of his devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So this is the most important part mentioned. Huh? Nahim tishtami vekunte yogi nam hridayeshu va. Yeah. Tatra tishtami narada yatra gayanti mad bhakta. Yeah. Where the devotees are, in the middle of them is where Supreme Personality of Godhead wants to stay on. Right. I remain where my devotees engage in glorifying my activities. And that's a whole devotional service, as we saw, right? Shmaranam, Kirtanam, even like we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam right now. Yeah,
Yeah, can you go back, please?
Yeah.
So here in the translation, the purport where it says, although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anant, eats through the fire sacrifices offered in the names of the different demigods, he does not take as much pleasure in eating through fire as he does in accepting offerings through the mouth of learned sages and devotees. Why do we do that fire sacrifices then?
Yeah. So there are few things happening here. So it is not that, so you can, okay, so the fire sacrifice is all mentioned in our Vedas. Yeah, Rig Veda and all that. And generally, we have been reading in the previous shlokas that all this fire sacrifice, we are generally doing it for some kind of materialistic benefits, right? Some material benefits for us. Like someone wants to be a king, or someone wants to be successful in something, right? Or for health reasons, and people want something. That's why we are doing some fire sacrifice, right? In general. But irrespective of that, because still we are doing prayers to all different devatas, and also Lord Vishnu is involved, right? It says that ultimately all the things offered in the fire is absorbed by Lord Vishnu himself, even if it's through different demigods, through different devatas, right? Because in the yajna we are doing offering to all different devatas, right? And then also Lord Vishnu. But what is saying, and then also the other part is in all different yugas, right? Like Satyuga and Treta Yuga and all that. One could perform those yajna in a very nice way, right? And for number of years, which is not possible in Kali Yuga, right? Where are we going to sit down and perform yajna in a way which can really please the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Because it has to be really done in a very scientific manner, the way it's mentioned in Vedas, with the right pronunciation and everything, which is not easy. Because if you remember, like when the Kali Yuga started in Nemisaranya, when all the Rishi Munis gathered, headed by Shonak Muni, as you know, right? They're asking Sud Goswami ji ki you recite the Srimad Bhagavatam, because we can do all the yajnas, but we know we are not going to be perfect. So the best thing to do is to read Srimad Bhagavatam, to recite Srimad Bhagavatam. That's when Sud Goswami Maharaj starts reciting Srimad Bhagavatam to all the Rishi Munis, right? So what is being mentioned is in the Bhakti Yoga through the devotees, when we offer the prasadam, that's what the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's what Lord Krishna loves more than what he is offered through the yajna. Because a devotee, when he's offering him the prasadam, it's more as a pleasure without asking for any material benefit. It's more a spiritual transcendental relationship.
Yes.
Right? So that's what is being mentioned here. And that is why it says that, and this is actually from, the shlok is one of the Purans or Vedas only, that Naham Tishtami Vekunte, like I don't stay in Vekunt also. That's where the Vekunt lok is there. And Yoginam Hridayeshu, like the people who do meditation and self-realization and all that, I don't even stay in their heart. Says Tatra Tishtami Narad. So he's telling this to Narad Muni, right? That Yatra Gayanti Mad Bhakta, Bhakton ke beech mein is where I stay. Devotees ke beech mein. My devotees engage in glorifying my activities is the place where I stay. Right? Make sense?
Yes.
You don't
Yes, it
seem to
does.
be don't seem to be convinced.
No, it does. Actually, the yajna and everything, it used to be one can say the scientific reason behind that was to purify the atmosphere and everything, because of all those ahutis we do into the sacrificial fire used to, and which is not possible in Kali Yuga, of course, because things
Yeah,
have
but
changed, people have changed. So
like in that yajna was too. So
complicated.
environment is one thing, but the real reason for doing the yajna, there are few reasons, right? One is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why when people used to do yajna, right? But really the people used to do yajna to achieve something. Like even right now we are reading about Maharaj Prithu, right? So Prithu Maharaj was doing Ashwamedh yajna, right? To be declared like he is the biggest ruler of the whole world. But that's when the Lord Vishnu appears and tells him, like, this is not for you. This is a more materialistic view. You really need to be a devotee. You really need to devote yourself. Right? So, let's read the next shlok. Tarun.
Yad Brahma Nityam Virajam Sanatanam Shraddha Tapo Mangala Mona Samyameha Samadhina Bibrati harta drashyate yatradam adharsa ivavyad bhasyate. In Brahminical culture, a Brahmana's transcendental position is eternally maintained because the injunctions of the Vedas are accepted with faith, austerity, scriptural conclusions, full sense and mind control, and meditation. In this way, the real goal of life is illuminated, just as one's face is fully reflected in a clear mirror. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Again, a nice purport we can read. Ajay?
Sure. Since it is described in the previous verse that feeding a living Brahman is more effective than offering oblations in a fire sacrifice, in the verse it is only clearly described what Brahmanism is and who a Brahman is. In the age of Kali, taking advantage of the fact that by feeding a Brahman one obtains more effective result than by performing sacrifices. A class of men with no Brahminical qualification claim that eating privilege known as Brahman Bhojan simply as the basis of their birth in the Brahman families. In order to distinguish this class of men from the real Brahmanas, Maharaja Prithu is giving an exact description of Brahman and Brahminical culture. One should not take advantage of his position simply to live like a fire without light. A Brahmana must be fully conversant with the Vedic conclusion which is described in Bhagavad Gita. Vedais cha sarvair aham iva vedya. Bhagavad BG 15.15. The Vedic conclusion, the ultimate understanding or Vedanta understanding is knowledge of Krishna. Actually, that is a fact because simply by understanding Krishna as he is, as described in Bhagavad Gita, Janma karma cha me divyam ivam yo vetti tattva tatah. One becomes a perfect Brahman. The Brahman who knows Krishna perfectly well is always a transcendental position. In a transcendental position, this is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26. Mam cha yo vyabhikarin bhakti yogendra svete sa gunan samtityaitam brahma bhayodaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service and who does not fall down in any circumstance at once transcends the mood of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahma. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So one who engages in full devotional service, yeah, bhakti yogena sevate, who does not fall down in any circumstance, yeah, at once transcends the modes of material nature. Say gunan. Gunan is the three modes of material nature, yeah, and thus comes to the level of Brahma, yeah, Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. And that is from the Bhagavad Gita. Right? Again, nice. Rinaji?
Therefore, a devotee of Lord Krishna is actually a perfect Brahman. His situation is transcendental, for he is free from four defects of conditional life, which are the tendencies to commit mistakes, to be illusioned, to cheat, and to possess imperfect senses. A perfect Vaishnav or Krishna conscious person is always in this transcendental position because he speaks according to Krishna and his representative. Because Vaishnavas speak exactly according to the tune of Krishna, whatever they say is free from these four defects. For example, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that everyone should always think of him, everyone should become his devotee, offer him obeisances, and worship him, and ultimately everyone should surrender unto him. These devotional activities are transcendental and free from mistakes, illusion, cheating, and imperfection. Therefore, Anyone who is a sincere devotee of Lord Krishna and who preaches this cult, speaking only on the basis of Krishna's instructions, is understood to be virajam or free from the defects of material contamination. A genuine Brahman or Vaishnava therefore depends eternally on the conclusion of the Vedas or Vedic versions presented by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. Only from Vedic knowledge can we understand the actual position of the Absolute Truth, who, as described in Srimad Bhagavatam, is manifested in three features, namely impersonal Brahman, localized Brahmatma, Paramatma, and at last the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This knowledge is perfect for time immemorial, and the Brahmanical or Vaishnava culture depends on this principle eternally. One should therefore study the Vedas with faith, not only for one's personal knowledge, but for the sake of spreading this knowledge and these activities through real faith in the words of Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Vedas. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. Like, I think the important part which is mentioned here is, it says the actual position of the absolute truth. Yeah. And that is what we need to understand from the Vedic knowledge. What we understand is the actual position of the absolute truth, who, as described in Srimad Bhagavatam, is manifested in three features, namely impersonal Brahman, right? So one is the soul itself, right? Once we realize the soul, we think about the impersonal Brahman. Then localized Paramatma, right? As we say, the soul is related to the Supreme Soul. But there is a localized position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the Super Soul. And then the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah. That is the knowledge which we understand once Vedas are studied. Yeah. And it says that this knowledge is perfect from time immemorial, right? Because this knowledge is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. Yeah. Actually, it's a long purport, but I think it's a pretty nice purport. So let's keep reading. Tarun?
In this verse, the word Mangala, auspicious, is very significant. Srila Sridhara Swami quotes that to do what is good and to reject what is not good is called Mangala or auspicious. To do what is good means to accept everything favorable to the discharge of devotional service. And to reject what is not good means to reject everything not favorable for discharging devotional service. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we accept this principle by rejecting four prohibited items, namely illicit sex life, intoxication, gambling, and flesh eating, and accepting the daily chanting of at least 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and meditation 3 times a day by chanting the Gayatri Mantra. In this way, one can keep his Brahmanical culture and spiritual strength intact. While following these principles of devotional service strictly, chanting 24 hours a day the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One makes positive progress in spiritual life and ultimately becomes completely fit to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Because the ultimate goal of studying or understanding the Vedic knowledge is to find Krishna, one who follows the Vedic principles as described above can from the very beginning see all the features of Lord Krishna, the Absolute Truth, very distinctly as one who sees one's own face completely reflected in a clear mirror. The conclusion is therefore that a Brahmana does not become a Brahmana simply because he is a living entity or is born in a Brahmana family. He must possess all the qualities mentioned in the Shastras and practice the Brahmanical principles in his life. Thus, he ultimately becomes a fully Krishna conscious person and can understand what Krishna is. How a devotee consciously sees Krishna face to face within his heart is described in the Brahmana Samhita as follows. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So I think what are the important aspects mentioned here, right? is what a devotee is doing, right? And it's very interesting that Rasiksham Prabhuji has just joined us. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Right.
Because this is what Srila Prabhupada prescribed to all the devotees, right? And that is why it's a beauty of all the people in ISKCON is that they chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day. Yeah. So all the devotees, I mean, that's the devotional service without expecting anything. They chant 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra on a daily basis. And meditation 3 times a day by chanting the Gayatri Mantra. This is a very basic thing which every ISKCON devotee do, right? And that is so powerful because that is the devotional service, chanting 24 hours a day the Mahamantra, one makes positive progress in spiritual life. And then so what happens? And ultimately becomes completely fit to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Yeah. So how do you really do darshan of Lord Krishna himself? Yeah, even being in this materialistic world is by getting this spiritual connectivity through the Mahamantra. Yeah. So that's what is being described. And it also says that how a devotee continuously sees Krishna face to face within his heart is described in the Brahma Samhita as follows. Preman janchurita bhakti vilochanena santaha sadeva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram anchitya guna swarupam govindamadi purusham tamam bhajami. Right? So the devotee, by development of pure love for Krishna, constantly sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Sham Sundar, within his heart. That is the perfectional stage of Brahminical culture. Yeah. So nicely, all the devotional services described here. Yeah. So we'll read one more shlok. Rasiksham Prabhuji.
तेषामहं पादसरोजरेणु मार्यामहेयाधिकिरीटमायुः यं नित्यदा बिभ्रत आशु पापं नश्यतां सर्वगुणा भजन्ति. O respectable personalities present here, I beg the blessings of all of you that I may perpetually carry on my crown the dust of the lotus feet of such Brahmanas and Vaishnavas until the end of my life. He who can carry such dust on his head is very soon relieved of all the reactions which are arise from the sinful life, and eventually he develops all good and desirable qualities. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So who is speaking this? Who is talking right now? Yeah. Who is talking to all the citizens?
Raghu Maharaj.
Prithu Maharaj, right? Prithu Maharaj.
Yeah.
So Prithu Maharaj is the one who is saying this. What is he saying? Our respected personality is present here, right? With the blessings of all of you, I may perpetually carry on my crown, the dust of the lotus feet of such Brahmins and Vaishnavas. Which Brahmins and Vaishnavas? Which we read in the previous shloks, right? Who is a real Brahman? Who is a real Vaishnava, right? Until the end of my life. And why would he do that? Because if it's done like that, it says, Yam nityada vibhrat ashu papam. Ashu papam nashyatyamum sarvaguna bhajanti. Yeah. All reactions which arise from the sinful life will be relieved from. And eventually he develops all good and desirable qualities. Okay. So I think we'll pause here. We'll continue to read this Prithu Maharaj's transcendental message to everyone. I think so much for the devotional service, right? So and then we'll continue reading tomorrow. Let's hear a nice devotional bhajan. Yeah. And then we'll see you tomorrow at 10.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Krishna. So you see how devotees totally surrender and dedicated to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, right? So they do the chanting and all the devotional kirtan and katha and everything else, right? Without asking for any material benefits. And that's what we have been reading in Prithu Maharaj's message. So, right, Hare Krishna. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 p.m. Yeah?
Hare Krishna. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.